So, Jason, I want to formally welcome you back to Beyond MD and for round two. Sorry for putting you through this twice, but I'm really happy you're here with me today.
No problem, my pleasure.
No problem. And you are in Saskatoon, so sunny Saskatoon. And how has it been over there? Is it living up to its name?
It's been sunny and windy, which that lives up to that lives up to our reputation.
Jason, I think you have an interesting background because you weren't always in the financial space. Why don't you just tell us about what you do today, but then how you got there?
Sure. What I do today, so I focus 100% on the Canada Pension Plan (CPP), and so all my work revolves around that. So basically, think of it as number crunching for individuals and professionals that advise individuals on CPP matters. I do estimates and analysis for them. Also provide a lot of educational content. So that's a more recent stream of business. And then I'm also working on a number of technology tools that I hope to be introducing and making available to the public shortly.
Now, on the educational side of things, if people wanted to follow your content, what's the best way to follow you?
The best way to find out when something is new is LinkedIn. That's where I post when new material is available. I have a YouTube channel with a bunch of animated videos, basically cartoons, that are meant to really simplify some of the more specific, complex topics. Also provide not animated, so just more traditional educational material where it's just me delivering things almost like a presentation. And that part is growing and will continue to grow. Also do speaking events for associations, conferences, asset managers, things like that.
What is your YouTube channel called, Jason?
It's just the Fine Point Solutions.
Okay.
So the company name.
Okay, amazing. And back in the day, you used to be an engineer, correct?
That's
and so,
right. Yeah.
And so, how did you shift into finance?
The same thing that led me into engineering is what got me into finance. It really comes down to it's the curiosity I have to learn how things work. So when starting out my career as an engineer, I also had to figure out all the money and investing stuff that comes with life. And so when something is interesting to me, I tend to get pretty deep into the details. So it started out as teaching myself basically how to be a hobby portfolio analyst, turned into me taking the CFA program. When I started the CFA program, it really was more out of personal interest. But then when my time in northern Alberta in the oil sands came to an end, I decided to pursue work in the financial space rather than looking for another conventional engineering role. And that's what led me into the financial planning world.
So let's start with the very basics. Let's say we have a new small business owner who recently incorporated. They're paying themselves salary, and then they're told that they are going to be contributing to the CPP. When I did this many, many years back, my first question was, what is the CPP? Maybe we could just start there.
Sure. So the best way to think about the CPP is I'm going to go national, I guess, for a second. The government has what's called three-pillar framework for retirement income. And so the government basically has decided that there are programs that we want to have in place that help people eliminate poverty and help people have money when they're no longer able to work. And the CPP is one element in what's referred to as a three-pillar framework. And the three pillars are the CPP and OAS, pillar number one. Pillar number two is basically employer-sponsored programs. So, any of the pensions, whether they're defined benefit pensions or just RRSP, savings plans, programs sponsored by employers. And then the third pillar is your own personal savings. So what the CPP is meant to do is be one element in an overall system that has individual objectives and goals, but together they also have a unified objective and goal as well.
Okay, and what are the key features or the key risk mitigating features of CPP? And these are things that I think people could think about when they're deciding, well, do I pay myself salary and do I want to be contributing to the CPP? Because I think these key features are maybe not talked about enough.
Sure, and I'll kind of relate things back to that three-pillar framework because it's really useful. CPP, I'll kind of maybe take a step back and just review the purpose of the CPP. The purpose of the CPP, This goes back to one of the original founding statements. The purpose of the CPP is to make reasonable minimum levels of income available at normal retirement ages. So in that statement, there's three elements: reasonable, minimum, and at normal retirement ages. And each of these three statements or words embodies a really fundamental concept. Reasonable represents the idea that the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And so the CPP is referred to in CPP language, that's how referred to as a contributory plan, but basically in human talk, the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And what you put in is summarized by your average of your earnings over your lifetime. That's really supposed to be a single number that represents what you put in. You can think of your lifetime average earnings as your personal slice of a possible full CPP pie. Minimum, in the purpose of the CPP, is what the CPP program is designed to provide back out to you. So the original CPP program was designed to provide 25% of your lifetime average earnings back out to you when you start. At normal retirement ages embodies the idea that the CPP, even though it is a mandatory program, the architects of the CPP understood that there's a lot of individual circumstances and we want to give people optionality and choice. And so the age that you start CPP is probably the most important of those options because that actually changes how much you'll receive. You can think of it this way: if your lifetime average earnings is the size of your personal slice of the CPP pie, the age you start taking CPP determines how big the CPP pie is for you. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to that three-pillar framework and CPP's risk mitigation features, the way I like to put it is this: your money from the CPP is guaranteed, it lasts until you die, and CPP provides inflation protection. So money from CPP is guaranteed. When you look at all your possible sources of retirement income, so whether it's programs like the CPP, OAS, employer-sponsored programs, or your own personal savings, some of those sources have risk. The amount you receive is not necessarily guaranteed, and others provide you with that guarantee. So as a source of retirement income, compared to, say, your own investment portfolio, the CPP has no market risk or sequence of return risk. To use finance lingo or jargon.
Okay. Now, why is CPP sometimes a polarizing topic? Because sometimes we'll hear accountants encourage people to, well, maybe you don't need to take salary, maybe take dividends and then avoid paying into the CPP. I think we can all come to terms with the fact that the CPP is not a tax, it's a premium, it's an investment. Mm-hmm. And maybe the polarization revolves around that point that I just mentioned, but in your mind, why is it such a polarizing topic at times?
I break that up into two categories, but ultimately it comes down to fairness or perceived fairness. So first of all, some people question how the CPP should exist as a program for social policy. And then second, how an individual should make their own personal CPP decisions can be a polarizing topic itself. So the CPP is polarizing both from a national level and an individual level. That whole mandatory nature itself is divisive. The sustainability of the program sometimes comes into question. So those are all individual parts of polarization that I kind of group, as CPP as a national level topic. At the individual level, even how to analyze CPP numbers, how to decide your start date, can be a polarizing topic in of itself. There's a lot of generalizations that people make. So there's a lot of what I would consider, misguided information out there about how to make the decision. More recent research has demonstrated how there is a lot of psychological biases in the decision making and the information that is available for making those decisions. So there's a lot of new research, I guess, that demonstrates, which should be improved ways or better ways to help, make CPP a little bit less polarizing. But overall, it does come down to fairness and perceived fairness. People want to feel like they got value out of something that they were forced to put into the program in the first place, and that ultimately, I think, is at the root of that polarization.
Now, you already commented a little bit on what will determine how much CPP payout we get later on, but I'm wondering if you can just summarize the different factors that go into determining how much CPP we're going to be getting later on in life.
Yeah, there's two dimensions to it. There's time and money, and so people are required to put a certain amount of money in for a certain period of time, number of years. So really, that's what it comes down to. And so the more you put in, the more you'll get out. So adding a level of detail to that, there's an earnings threshold. So you contribute a percentage of your earnings, of your income. So whether that's salary, wages, commissions, whatever, a certain percentage of that as a contribution. You will continue to pay that rate up to a maximum threshold. That's a number, to use CPP jargon, something called the year's maximum pensionable earnings, YMPE. So under the original program, there are two parts to the program. I'll just start with the original program. Once your earnings exceeded that YMPE number, you were done for the year. You don't have to make any more contributions until the next calendar year. Now, things have gotten a little bit more complicated recently because the CPP has been enhanced. And a consequence of that is there is now a second higher earnings threshold. And so, the simple way to think about that is the amount of contributions you need to make up to the original threshold has grown, has expanded, and the level of earnings that require contributions has also grown. The result, what you get out for making those additional contributions, is more benefit on the back end.
So you've touched on the basic CPP and the enhanced CPP. Jason, why was the CPP enhanced?
Yeah, so again, going back to that three-pillar framework, more recently there's been unfavorable trends with pillars number 2 and number 3. So basically there's been a decline in coverage by employer-sponsored pension plans, in particular defined benefit pensions. So what this means is more of the money from pillars number 2 and number 3 is exposed to market risks. Less is coming from guaranteed sources. So there's more pressure on individuals to get things right themselves because there's less guarantee in their available sources of retirement income. Get it right themselves can mean whether that they're do-it-yourself investors or through the advisors that they hire, or in the case of group benefit plans, the advisors chosen for them. So it was decided to address the weakenings of pillars number 2 and number 3 by strengthening pillar number 1. And so the CPP was enhanced to do just that, to add provide more guaranteed income as sort of a base foundational level of income that everyone, effectively everyone in Canada, more or less has access to.
Now, if we take the basic CPP and then the first and second enhancements, this next part, I don't want people to get too locked up in the numbers per se. Let's try to keep this as simple as possible. But when we account for the first and second enhancements, what are the contribution rates and the contribution amounts right now for somebody who would be contributing the maximum amount into CPP today? Okay.
So start with contribution rates, and I'll touch on contributions. So first of all, there's an employee's portion and an employer's portion.
Yeah.
And they're both equal. You can think of it a lot like your employer-sponsored programs, where you put in some and your employer makes a fully matched 100% match amount. So the original program, the base CPP, the employee put in 4.95%, and their employer matched them 4.95%. So what that means for self-employed individuals is they have to put in both parts, the employee's part and the employer's part. For incorporated business owners, the employee on their tax return pays, accounts for the employee's part, but it's their company that pays the employer's portion. And so again, so for the base CPP of the original program, the employees portion, or the first half, is 4.95%. For the first additional CPP, it's an additional 1% employees portion, and then on top of that, the employer makes a fully matched 1%. So what that additional 1% buys you is it buys you more earnings, what's called the earnings replacement rate. I'm not sure if I mentioned that part before. So what the CPP is designed to provide back out to you is a certain proportion, a certain earnings replacement rate is what it's called, a certain amount of your lifetime average earnings. So the original program was designed to provide you with 25% of your average lifetime earnings back out. What the enhanced CPP does is that's increasing from 25% to 33.33%. So for the first additional CPP, which requires contributions up to the original earnings threshold, the 1% that the employee has to put in, what that buys you is another 8.33% earnings replacement on top of the 25%.
Yep.
What the second additional CPP does, the second part of the enhancement, is it requires contributions between the old earnings threshold and the new higher earnings threshold. And the contribution rate for that is 4% paid by the employee, and then another 4% paid for by the employer. And so together, the earnings replacement rate for the second additional CPP is the full 33.33% on your earnings between the old threshold and the new higher threshold.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, there may be some years for some of us when income is a bit lumpy or maybe even non-existent. So let's say someone goes on maternity leave or paternity leave, or somebody's on sabbatical. I understand that there are certain years that can be dropped out when we're calculating our average income. Can you talk to us about what we need to know here and how this can help us in terms of smoothing out that average income for CPP calculations?
Right, and so everyone sort of has... So CPP is like two elements, two dimensions, time and money. And so again, you're to get to contribute the maximum, to get the full benefit out, you're required to contribute on earnings up to a particular maximum. That's the money side, for a certain number of years. That's the time side. And the CPP recognizes that everyone's going to have interruptions throughout the course of their life. They might be out of work for a variety of different reasons, laid off, health reasons, whatever. And so everyone's given forgiveness for a variety of reasons, and that's built into the program. And so everyone is allowed to drop out 17% of their lowest earning years for the base CPP, and that's for that original program, 17%. Things get a little bit more complicated for the enhanced CPP. The rules changed a little bit. There are other reasons. So you mentioned child raising. The CPP also acknowledges that caregivers of children might also experience low earning years or possibly even no earning years. So there's something called the child raising dropout. And again, the child raising dropout applies only to the base CPP, not the enhanced. And it allows you to drop out additional years between a child's year of birth and up to their 7th birthday.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Now, the enhanced CPP works a little bit differently. So what it does is, rather than lets you drop out years, for the child raising, for example, what it does is it calculates pretend income, and it will replace low income with the pretend income if the pretend income happens to be higher. And so where does this pretend income comes from? It's the 5 years, your earnings in the 5 years leading up to the year of the birth of a child. So basically, if this is where some of the planning can come in, is if you know you're having a child and you have any control over your income, it makes sense to have as much income in the 5 years prior to the birth of a child, because that's what's going to go into calculating what's called the imputed income or the pretend income that will be basically replace any zero earning years or any income that's actual income that's lower for those 7 years.
Now, in my reading, I also came across one term called the maximum pensionable earnings average, the MPEA. Is this something that's important for us to know about?
Yeah, that's part of the inflation protection. So I'll
Okay.
back up. There are two inflations with the CPP, wage inflation and price inflation. And so the MPEA is a number that's used to index your starting amount, your starting CPP amount by wage inflation. So think of it this way. When you started out, when you were younger, when you started contributing to the CPP, you were age 18, your wages were probably lower than at the end of your life purely because of wage inflation. What the MPEA does is it scales things up, all your past earnings, up to the equivalent for the year in which you start taking CPP. And the MPEA is what is how that's done. What the MPEA is, it's the 5-year average of those earnings thresholds, the YMPE, years maximum pensionable earnings. It's the 5-year average of the YMPE in the year you start and the YMPE in the 4 previous years. And so that's just a way to smooth things out.
Gotcha.
So that the increase in the maximum benefit amount each year is just kind of smoothed out. There isn't like really big years versus really, really small years.
Let's get to one interesting point here, and that is when should one consider starting CPP? So this goes back to the optionality that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
We have a decision to make. Do we start it earlier? Do we start it a bit later? What are the key considerations here in your mind?
Yeah, so first of all, the CPP provides a maximum benefit for those who start at age 70, but you can choose to take it earlier with reduced payments, basically. So you can start earlier, but if you do that, you'll get less money, or you can get more money if you start later. So before getting into numbers, the key considerations really are, in my opinion, going back to those risk reduction factors. How much of those risk reduction factors do you want? How much inflation protection do you want in your retirement income? How much do you want your retirement income to be guaranteed with no market risk? And considering longevity, for people that want to prioritize fear of their money running out, that's a reason to want to delay starting CPP, taking it later, because that's how you can get a larger amount that will last until you die.
Okay.
Beyond the numbers, it's can you afford to delay? Do you have other sources of retirement income that you can use while you're delaying the start of the CPP? And so we'll always break things up into those. It's the before the numbers considerations and then the after numbers, considering the numbers considerations.
I like that summary, and it's also really helpful to see how other people like yourself think through this question, because it's a common one. Now, maybe if we can, just go through a couple scenarios, and let's assume that for both scenarios, the doctors are contributing the maximum amount. The first one I had was for a more senior physician who was maybe born in 1970, and then the second scenario was for a more junior doctor recently into practice, starting or born, let's say, in 1993. This person would obviously enjoy more years of the enhanced CPP. Yeah. And I'm wondering if they were both going to get their CPP payout starting at age 65, how much would each expect in their scenario? If it's possible to go over this, I think it would be nice to just illustrate with some numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So really simple, short answer is the person born in 1993 is going to get about 51% more. So that's the short answer. Mm-hmm. So the longer answer, so why that is so someone born in 1970 who starts in age 65, they're going to start in the year 2035. The enhanced CPP started in 2019. So for the first additional CPP, the first part of the enhancement, they're going to contribute into the enhancement for 16 out of 40 years. I should back up. For the enhanced CPP, it's going to take 40 years to sort of transition.
I see.
Okay. The way it works is you. Let's just put. Yeah, it's going to take 40 years. So someone who was born in 1970 could only have contributed a maximum of 16 out of those 40 years.
Yep. because the enhancement started in
Yeah.
2019.
And they
Yeah.
do all the calculations on a going forward basis.
Yeah.
For the second additional CPP, that's going to be 11 out of 40 years. So if you contrast that with the individual who was born in 1993, they're going to start CPP if they start at age 65 in the year 2058.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first additional CPP, they will have contributed 49 out of the 30 years. Out of the 40 years. 39 out of the 40 years. So almost the full time. And so those additional years into the enhancement translate into more benefit on the way out. For the second additional CPP, they're going to be able to contribute 34 out of the 40 years. So again, almost the full 40 years. So by numbers, I was estimating the person born in 1970, the older person, who starts CPP at age 65 in 2035, estimated their total benefit amount to be just under $2,200 a month, or just over $26,000 per year. The person born in 1993, that amount is, in nominal dollars, it was just under $5,300 a month. But when I translate that back into, to make that a more fair comparison, to translate that back into $2035, I get $3,273. So that's about 50% more than the person born in 1970.
Thanks for that, Jason.
And we kept everything the same, like you said, the maximum contributor, starting at age 65. That difference, that 50% difference, is purely the impact of the enhanced CPP.
So for the busy small business owner who has just a lot going on in their life and they're trying to decide from their corporation, salary or dividend, do I even consider contributing into CPP? Like, if you were going to summarize from our conversation today, just the big take-home points regarding CPP that we should all know about, what would those be, Jason?
Yeah, so first of all, CPP is a great source of income, of retirement income, because of those risk reduction features. They're almost unique. You can't buy a market product that replicates those features, all of those features. So again, money is guaranteed, lasts until you die. CPP provides inflation protection. And so it does that. It does what it's supposed to do very well. The CPP provides a minimum level of income that's intended to be part of a secure foundation, a foundation that people can build up with their own personal savings if they want more. It's also a better deal than most people realize because of the tax credits and deductions that CPP contributions are eligible for. And this is something particularly true for business owners that's often overlooked. And then for business owners, you can also consider that they have more control about, over how much they receive in income and whether or not they're contributing to the CPP program in the first place, and that's the whole salary versus dividends conversation. And so because they have control over their income and can control how much they participate into the CPP program, they can really optimize how much they put in relative to how much they get out. And so if they're really on top of the numbers and the timing, those incorporated business owners really have that opportunity that traditionally employed and people just simply don't have.
Jason, any final thoughts on anything CPP related that we've missed on today or that you just wanted to share?
When you think about the CPP, always remember that money from the CPP is more than just that dollar amount alone. It's a dollar amount with those three special features. And each of those special features has a value on its own, even though that value is hard to see or quantify. Money from CPP is guaranteed to last until you die. CPP provides inflation protection. It's hard to strip out a value for each of those things on its own and say that's worth this to you. But don't forget that those features are there and they are providing some value. When it comes time to make your CPP decisions, I also think it's really important that you consider CPP together with all your other sources of retirement income rather than looking at the CPP in isolation, making a CPP decision based on that, just on CPP numbers alone. using the CPP holistically with your other sources of income is how you can get the most out of all your retirement income assets, and that's really important. That's how you're really able to again optimize and get the most value out of everything working together.
And Jason, is there anything that you wanted to share about yourself before we wrap things up?
This is really something that's I really enjoy crunching CPP numbers and figuring out these kinds of things for individuals. So I just I encourage you, if you have CPP, you want CPP number crunching done or have CPP questions, feel free to reach out to me. Got lots of new stuff in the pipeline coming out this year, so stay tuned for that. Lots of really exciting educational content and technology tools that I'll be hoping to introduce very, very shortly.
That's amazing, Jason. And I have to thank you because you were the first one to reach out to me regarding CPP. We started chatting on LinkedIn, and until we had connected, I really wasn't thinking much about it. So you got me thinking about it, and you made it a topic of learning for me. So I want to thank you for that.
You're very welcome. It is something that, I think is really underutilized. A lot of people think, relative to their portfolios, for a lot of people, the CPP is a small amount. But it is, because of those risk reduction features, it's a small amount that really provides that base level of support that's very secure, has those features. So that is something that can be built off of in really creative ways when people are doing their own financial planning, again, for their own personal situation. And that's something else that's important to realize with the CPP is your CPP answers and preferences are going to be very different than someone else's. And so there's a lot of generalizations that are made about CPP decisions. And I personally, I think it's best that people ignore those generalizations, have their own individual numbers figured out for them, and make their own CPP decision based on their holistically with all the rest of their financial world, and really customize it, because it is very customizable and individual, and can have such a bigger impact than I think people realize. Once they dig into the numbers and really look at things and how it can impact their overall financial life.
Jason, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I want to thank you for giving up time to join me for the second time, overcoming technical issues in the first one. So I really want to thank you for your time. Okay.
No problem, and I really enjoyed the talk you had with Aravind, my good friend Aravind, who have done a lot of CPP work. That was a fantastic conversation, and again, very relevant to business owners, and pointed out a lot of things that often go misunderstood, and again, are really powerful when you strip them out. And
Jason, thanks for that, and I appreciate that. I really do, and I will remind people, for a complimentary episode to the one you just heard, you can go check mine out with Aravind, and that was probably our last episode of 2024. So, Jason, have a great one, and we will stay in touch, okay?
Wonderful. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.